In this lesson, we will explore how to write a story. Let's begin. Now, how do we start a story? If you're able to answer by describing the setting and/or character, you are correct. Remember we said when we looked at the elements of the story that creating or presenting or describing or setting and/or character is very essential. Remember that we need to give our reader some kind of context. We need to ensure that the reader has an idea of where the story takes place and has an idea of what the character or characters look like. By doing so, the reader is able to create a picture in his or her mind. Now, once we have presented our setting and/or character, then we look at introducing our conflict, very important. And when we talk about introducing our conflict, remember we said every story must have a conflict. And because it is a short story, we need to start introducing our conflict as soon as we have presented the reader with information about our setting or character. With this said, let me remind you that you can either present the character first and then the setting, or the setting first and then the character. Your choice. Also, you need to ensure that the events of the story are logical, meaning that you present the event in some kind of order. I recommend you use chronological order. Chronological means time. So, in presenting the plot using chronological order, it means that things will occur in order. So, the first thing that happens, then the next thing that happens, first, second, third, so in the order in which they occur. This will ensure that the reader is not left confused. Next, we need to provide details about the setting where required. What do I mean? If we have a change in location, if we find that, for example, in the story of Harry and Marybeth, we see that Harry was first in his room and then he went down and he went to the Johnson's house. That is a change of this setting. And so, because there is a change in the setting, the writer gives us a brief details about the Johnson's house. Next, we look at the inclusion of dialogue. Now, some people believe that you must have dialogue in your story. It is good to have. However, I will further say to this that if your dialogue serves no purpose, leave it out. What do I mean? Your dialogue should be used to provide the reader with some kind of information. Are you providing information about characters or setting or conflict? Is your dialogue being used to progress the plot of the story? For example, is your dialogue. Let's look at the story with Harry and Marybeth. At the end of the story, we see the use of the dialogue is there to provide information that, hey, everyone who lived in the Marybeth house died years ago. And from there, we can speculate that Marybeth would have been a ghost. All right? Now, the next thing we need to look at, we must have a climax. And after we have the climax of our story, we need to wrap up the plot. We need to resolve the conflict. The setting must come to some kind of conclusion. Not the setting, the plot must come to some kind of conclusion. This is very important. Now, how do we end our story? At the end of our story, it is important that we do not introduce any new information to the story. Remember, you have limited words, or should I say limited time. The recommended word limit is 400 to 450 words for the CSEC level. So you have limited time in which to write. So when you present new information, the reader is now left confused as to why did the writer include this? What does this mean? How does this tie to the rest of the story? So take that into consideration. Next, as I said before, ensure you resolve the conflict. Followed by, in resolving your conflict, you can decide that you're going to have a twist at the end of the story, or you're going to have a cliffhanger, leaving the reader guessing. Now, in our second story, Marybeth and Harry, we see that at the end of that story, there's a twist. Harry thought that Marybeth was this beautiful girl living next door. It turns out that Marybeth was in fact a ghost. And so the writer leaves the reader now to be like, wow, what just happened? Leaves the reader to question everything, to guess. That is a technique the writer uses. Now, also, we can leave the reader guessing, as I said before, just like in the story with Carl. His brother decided to dig up his grave to prove if he was still alive. And we're left guessing whose body it is. Where is Carl? Why is it that he chose to fake his death? All of these questions are there. And once again, this is a technique that is used by the writer. Now, our next lesson, we're going to dive deeper into developing the exposition.